Trans Mountain Expansion Project is a very large project that spans 2 provinces in Western Canada. It's 1,150 kilometer long pipeline, and there's a tank terminal in Edmonton, there's a tank terminal in Burnaby, and there's offshore facilities to load vessels in Westridge. And associated with that is 12 pump stations that move the oil from Edmonton down to Burnaby.
This project was initially proposed at a time where the tide was really starting to turn about pipelines in Canada.
It's a historic project. It is one of the most challenging projects that our country has ever faced, and it's probably going to be one of the last of its kind.
The ultimate legacy of this project is to bring energy to the world.
The Trans Mountain Expansion Project is a very important piece of infrastructure for Canada. Canada has some of the largest oil reserves in the world. Depending on how you look at it, we're ranked about number 3. What's unique about Canada is that we don't have the ability to trade with any other than one country, which is the United States. Most countries who have oil reserves like ours have the ability to get their oil to tidewater. That's really what Trans Mountain is about, is creating a path for Canada to be able to export its energy resources to the rest of the world. By exporting energy, we create value in our economy that pays for healthcare, education, and it also helps support the transition for important issues like reconciliation and energy transition.
We've been given an opportunity to build a project that is so meaningful at so many different levels, both from individual communities that we touch to national infrastructure that's good for the nation and good for oil producers in Alberta. And the determination we formed really hinged on that belief that we were doing something important for the country.
This project was developed over a decade. It was a decade in the making before we even put the first shovel in the ground. And during that time, we spent a lot of time with various stakeholders along the route to make sure that we are building the safest and best pipeline we could with the minimal impact to our neighbors.
The planning of a route for a pipeline like this, it's the most important exercise in terms of getting an application put together. In this instance, we had a good starting place because we did have that existing right-of-way, and it was really using that line as our default, and then through engagement or technical assessments, land use, then it would determine the deviations. You can imagine that in 70 years, land use has changed. In particular, what happens is once we get into the Greater Vancouver area, that land use has changed that significantly. And so that's where the project decision through engagement decided to use a new right-of-way to get to Burnaby Terminal. So that split from the existing right-of-way that happens in the township of Langley and goes right to Burnaby Terminal.
In the early days of the project, we undertook a very extensive engagement program. It was in person, bringing our executive team with us to visit these communities, to sit down with leadership, be it an Indigenous or a community mayor, to listen, to talk about the fact we wanted to expand our Trans Mountain system and what that would mean and what their views and concerns would be about that.
The very first round of open houses started in Edmonton and moved through Wabamun and Valemount and Blue River and all the way down and out to Vancouver Island. And it was a really fascinating experience to go from one end to the other of the pipeline, because it also gave you a really good sense of how different the opinions were. You know, some of our early sessions in Edmonton and Stony Plain and Wabamun, everyone was interested in jobs, and their key question was, when are you going to get this built? You know, and you move into the interior, and then it's questions about infrastructure and concerns about, you know, having big construction populations in these little local communities. And then you got out to Vancouver and then out to Vancouver Island, and it was clear what the opposition to the project was and where it was located and what their concerns were.
Many of those conversations were not easy. But it wasn't just a matter of a thick skin, it was understanding and compassion, because usually people were feeling heard for the first time because no one was having those hard conversations. So I think that was very different for us. We met with different interest groups, individuals that would probably normally never get an audience with our chief executive or with our senior leadership. That was very important to the company, and that was a very meaningful way to connect and to understand what types of things we needed to focus on, because that's where the concerns were.
Our first encounter with Trans Mountain would have been a bunch of emails that we had ignored. There was a lot of dissent with the pipeline going on, and there was a lot of talk on the TV and a lot of media. The overall feeling for any nation was, to look after the land, no pipeline. And we just ignored the emails, and then eventually set up a meeting with 7 or 8 of our local elders. We had some discussion, talked about the pipeline. The Trans Mountain people understood that we're not oil advocates, we're ocean protection advocates, and we need each other to protect the ocean. And our conversations started getting better and better and better. More questions were getting answered that we needed to hear. There was late nights, a lot of meetings, a lot of conversation to be had, a lot of conversation that you didn't want to hear. We got together during those conversations and came together with a mutual respect.
It took us probably about 1.5 years or a little bit longer to develop our mutual benefit agreement with Trans Mountain, to make sure that we had all of our bases covered for our community, not only for at the time, but today and into the future. We always talk about not only this generation, but the next 7 generations to come is where we want to make sure that we're looking after.
They come out and had a lot of meetings with different people to how to understand what they were there, what role they were going to play in it. He wanted to know more about the environmental issues and the cultural issues to understand, and he wanted to listen to more leadership to understand how to work with them and to have a better idea on how to build a relationship to understand, so we can build trust and understandings of how we're going to go forward.
They talked to the mayor and council, they talked to different stakeholders about what would the community want to see from a social economic perspective and how they could integrate and collaborate with us. So one of the things that was really important was to understand that we have a tourism economy here. If there's 550 to 600 people working within the community on the pipeline project, that would take up all the accommodations and more. So the community asked the Trans Mountain to do a camp, and we negotiated what we call a private contribution agreement with Trans Mountain. So that's for an upgrade to our septic system and then an upgrade to our water system. That provided potable water to the camp itself, and then also the septage could be hauled within Clearwater instead of to Kamloops, which is 125 kilometers from here. So that was a huge benefit I see for both. Equal opportunity, Trans Mountain gets their benefit, and we end up with the infrastructure that we can now do infill within our community.
As we listened to concerns, as we completed our own risk assessments and our own modeling, we understood where to address the concerns and the types of commitments and resources we needed to put against that.
We made commitments about construction timing, and we made commitments about the location of the pipe, and we made commitments about managing offsets. Sometimes the feedback turned into the kind of very robust community benefits program that we have for the pipeline, where we recognize that just by virtue of our presence, we are having an impact on these people and their communities, and we have an obligation to give back. So there's a whole program where we give back to those communities. And so as a result of that, some small communities have been able to build rec centers and trails and other things. The facilities application was filed in late 2013, and it consisted of 8 volumes of information, which made up about 16,000 pages, and about 37 binders, I think, that someone has stored somewhere. And the application itself set out the engineering and design for the proposed project, a proposed route corridor that showed where we planned to put the new pipeline, and it also included a very substantial environmental and socioeconomic effects assessment for the project. And following that, the National Energy Board established the hearing process. And the hearing process was a significant process for the team. Through 7 rounds of information requests, we answered something in the order of 17,000 questions, information requests. And in November of 2016, the Government of Canada issued the Certificate of Public Convenience and Necessity, and we had what we needed to proceed.
It was in 2018 when the Federal Court of Appeal quashed the certificate approving the Trans Mountain Expansion project.
It was a bit of a day. I think anyone who was in the office on August 30th, 2018 just felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. You know, we had just started mobilizing construction. I think there were shovels in the ground in our first pipeline spread in Edmonton just days before. And then this court decision came down, and it was really clear that nobody really knew what this meant for us. You know, we had already faced so many challenges. The hearing process had been enormous. The project had been sold to the federal government. We'd survived all of these challenges already, and here was a new mountain to climb.
At that point, the decision had been made that we would go forward for a recertification or a new certification. A big part of my team's role and my role in 2019 and 2020 was working at leading the detailed route process and getting this footprint approved.
And then, you know, the hearing order was stood up, and we repeated a mini version of the same process we'd gone through a few years earlier. And so we gathered our evidence and our proposals about what we'd done, and away we went. So more rounds of IRs, more questions, more assessment, more late nights. I actually have really, really clear memories again of, I think it was June of 2019. The text messages started to fly in that the decision was out and that the government had decided to issue a new certificate for the project to allow us to proceed. So it was a really nice bookend moment to remember, you know, that experience of feeling, you know, almost like we were beyond hope, to feeling like we had, you know, succeeded, and that we were getting back to work to build this, you know, this great project that we all believe so much in.
Trans Mountain's approach to the environment, I think, is good. They listen and hear what we have to say, looking after the land, the water, the trees. We want to make sure that we have all of this here for the next generation.
When I think about Trans Mountain's position on traditional land use, it's more about traditional knowledge, and it's about promises, and it's about relationships. We don't see it as another box you need to check on our application.
Traditional land use is not just an ancestral gathering, hunting, fishing place. It's something that we still use today.
It's incredible, the history, when you work with communities and you get to walk the lands with them, hearing creation stories, stories of sacred places, waterways, areas of spiritual and traditional practice. It's all around us here, and it was our job to ensure that we protected those areas. So really it was ensuring that we were following protocols. We were working with the appropriate government representatives, Indigenous government representatives, and their technical staff. And for every step in the way, we had cooperation and collaboration with the Indigenous communities. So if there was something that was found, we ensured all the protocols were in place to ensure they were protected and that it returned to the communities with care.
For thousands of years, we've been out here living off this land, and I think it's something that we need to protect.
The values that I have are the same values that other people have, but we just want to make sure that that's carried on for generations to come. So we want to make sure that we're protected. We want to make sure that it's not only here for us, but for everyone here to enjoy.
We start putting the right people together to work together to understand how to sit down, making sure the things that we're going to go ahead the way they're supposed to. Environmentally, the cultural end of things, like letting them know that there's some places inside the valley here that were things that were put away that couldn't be touched, and our people understood where they were. So they developed monitors and sitting down like that to making sure these things were going to happen.
Indigenous monitors are an active part of the environmental team at Trans Mountain. We bring an Indigenous eye to everything that happens on the project, from environmental monitoring to construction monitoring. We're here to make sure that, number one, the environment is taken care of, and that any cultural or historical or any land use is done in a respectful manner.
Our Indigenous monitors are hired as part of our environmental inspection team. They're actually on the job learning with our environmental inspectors about how to become an environmental inspector. But more importantly, they're sharing how they view the landscape. And that's what's so important about this program. It's taking that traditional knowledge and it's talking to someone about what it means when you start working on a watercourse, why that watercourse is so important to them. It transforms how the crews look at the landscape.
Working with the Indigenous Monitor has given me a much deeper appreciation for the cultural significance of the resources that are out here in the ocean, the resources that we could impact with our project. It's helped me understand why it's so important that we protect those resources, not just for the ecological value that they have, but also the cultural value that they have to the Indigenous communities in this area.
I think this project has definitely revolutionized the way that people are going to look at the Indigenous Monitor program, just with all the different kinds of engagement that the monitors do have. This will be kind of the footprint of like how a program should be run.
One of the things that drew me to Trans Mountain was not just its commitment to the environment, but a lot of the challenges that we had before us. We're going to have over 50,000 person days during construction where we have out a person doing a fish salvage or someone doing a nest sweep.
We are focusing a lot on environment, and so our policies and procedures are pretty strict.
We have over 10,000 environmental pages of specifications that we need to construct our project to. We have over 2,000 environmental commitments that have been made through hearings, through meetings. We have over 60 environmental conditions. When we did our baseline studies, we discovered over 2,000 watercourses and wetlands. There's hundreds of archaeological features. There's dozens of different types of wildlife species.
I think a lot of people don't realize how much time and energy we invest in environmental protection. There's so many different mitigation measures that we implement, and we're constantly adapting and evolving those mitigations to make them more effective.
There's some things on this project that I've never heard of before. On one case, for a SARA-listed species, we're actually taking an anthill, we're moving it off the right-of-way, and then we're going to be moving it back. We've built amphibian highways, or if you've ever been to another place familiar, Banff, and you see the over and underpasses, we've recreated that on our project for frogs and for amphibians. Right here in Lac du Bois, we have cryptogamic crust, where you have to excavate the crust and put it in climate-controlled areas and facilities until you're ready to restore it. We have Oregon forest snails, where we have to, on some cases, do a translocation study and for 10 years be monitoring the success of that.
We schedule our works around watercourses to be within the least risk window, so to avoid the sensitive species and life stages that may be present in those watercourses.
We've rebuilt eagles' nests and seen success happen there, where not only are the eagles using it again, but they're actually having young, and the young are fledging from those nests.
Here at Westridge, we have a myriad of environmental mitigation and monitoring measures that we put in place for all the activities that we undertake. We have marine mammal monitoring during impact pile driving to ensure that no marine mammals are within the established exclusion zones. We have the fish acoustic deterrent system to deter fish from the immediate vicinity of our impact pile driving to protect them from potential harm. We also have a turbidity curtain that was custom designed and manufactured that we have installed around the foreshore work area.
We're actually offsetting the impact to some wetlands we're going through, which is the first of its kind in the pipeline industry.
There's so many documentations, you know, like the environmental protection plan. I mean, it's a 700-page document. It kind of gives us all of the environmental mitigations before, during, and after the project.
When water is redirected on any of the crossings, CMEC is involved. We have our environmental monitors on there. We have our safety people on there. We have our Indigenous monitors on site. So looking at, all of the impacts to the wildlife and making sure that it's taken care of.
We need environmental walkthroughs to make sure we know all the environmental features that are around the watercourse. We then contact resource specialists to do fish salvages and amphibian salvages. Once these are all completed and documented, then we can start our isolation.
One of the things I like to focus on is water quality monitoring throughout the area.
Protection of the environment is here to stay. And if we as an industry or other companies in other industries want to rise to the challenge that has been put out to us, we need to think about things differently. And what I hope this shows other companies is that it can be done. We can think about things differently. We can think about how we protect the environment differently. And it's not seen as a restriction to our work, but part of how we do our work. Communities have been here for thousands of years. And when you take a look at thousands of years, that's not just, being here on the landscape, that's their ancestors. And so a critical part of that is our baseline studies for archaeology. And that is one of the things that we're most proud of. We have one of the largest archaeology programs in Canadian history. We have spent tens of millions of dollars supporting the preservation of heritage resources. Because we realize when we go through here, we want to minimize our impacts, but whatever is left in the ground for that heritage resource, there's only one chance to collect that information. Once we've gone through, that opportunity is lost. And Trans Mountain has a policy and a practice to bring our communities along for the ride. It's not just us going out there with our consultants. We invite the communities that we work in to participate in those programs. So that way, the generation here and future generations can have that information about their community and about their past.
Trans Mountain involved all the local bands and nations through lots of communications. Selected individuals were able, like myself, to be monitors during baseline studies.
We observed over 360 archaeological sites. We were able to avoid over 150. A lot of times through very difficult construction methods, including trenchless technology that would cost the company millions of dollars to avoid these sites. We would do micro reroutes along an area to ensure that we avoided it. But if we couldn't avoid this site, we made sure we did everything we could to recover as much information as possible.
There are certain sites that were already known archaeological sites, so the focus there was just to really map out where the boundaries are going to be. And there's one site I went to where the ARCs had to do about 120 shovel tests where they dig down about a meter just to figure out what kind of grid they're going to set up and how it's going to affect the construction footprint.
Chance finds is something that always happens on a project. We knew it would happen on a project and we were prepared. So what we did is we developed what are called contingency plans. These were approved by the regulators and said what we would do in terms of finding something that we didn't expect, whether it be a wildlife feature, wet soils, or even an archaeological feature. And so there were many times, and the key to this was training our workforce of over 35,000 people what to do if you saw it. And so that's where things like our environmental protection rules come into play and our employee training. They showed people what to do in those times.
My first experience with Trans Mountain's chance find process was they sent me to a potential archaeological find, and it was this humongous hand wall. We shut everything down, 30-meter buffer so that no work actually happens there, and then we have to have an archaeologist come in to look at it more thoroughly. And the construction guy's willingness to actually just stop the work and fence it all off was awesome.
So just off of the right-of-way, when they were widening the road out, they dug down not even half a foot. They found a biface. It was perfect. It was about the size of my hand, and it was a cutting tool, like a spear, that was there I drove over it for many years. Other people drove over it, but it was right on the side of the road.
There's been a lot of lithic finds, so rocks that have been chipped off, used for tools and whatnot. There's been a few significant finds that we've come around, fish weights that are used for nets and stuff like that. So a lot of heritage and culture finds that we have found on this project.
One of the more interesting finds we found, in my opinion, was a spearhead probably about 3 inches long. It's still as sharp as the day it was made. You could still hunt with the thing if you were to put it on a shaft. The artifacts that have been discovered, currently the bands are deciding amongst themselves what needs to happen with them. The idea for my band right now is to take some of the best ones that were found right near one of our village sites and display them in the band office.
Archaeology tells the story of our past. It's important for Canadians and for First Nation communities because people don't typically just go out and fund archaeology. The way we get that information is through development projects like ours. We're able to build on the history of what was once here. So that will enrich the history going forward and what we know about the people who lived on this land generations before us.
The Trans Mountain project, right from the beginning, started thinking about the impacts on the marine environment. It did a lot of listening. It reached out to a lot of networks of people, including those in the industry, those in local communities, and those in First Nations along the route of the shipping channel. And you could tell that it was listening and then trying to find solutions that would be substantive. It actually invested in developing the networks so that the solutions could be found because Trans Mountain couldn't do it by itself.
We had meetings, we had information sessions with communities all the way along the shipping corridor. That's very unique for a pipeline company to move beyond their dock. But we understood that even if we don't own or operate ships, once they pull away, they're technically not our responsibility. But as we were proposing this project, as we were listening to those concerns, we understood that we care very much about how shipping happens. There was a lot of risk assessment done, a lot of sitting with members of the Coast Guard, the pilots, the Port Authority, everybody responsible for moving ships through the harbor today. And once we understood where the hazards were, there were things done immediately to improve the safety of ship movement, be it better communication on the water. It's amazing what you can do when you bring people together who don't always get a chance to get together in that way.
As part of our commitments through the project, we've facilitated an expansion of the Marine Oil Spill Response Organization that serves the west coast of Canada. It will double the response capacity and halve the response time for responding to marine oil spills. And that's something that will benefit all shipping in the Pacific corridor. And it's something that's also going to create hundreds of new jobs beyond the pipeline in the maritime communities on the west coast of Canada.
We live right outside of Race Rocks, and the ships that are going up island, down island, into Puget Sound, into Vancouver, Seattle, they all converse at Race Rocks. They cross in front of each other.
We want to have an active participation in all the things that are here. We don't want to sit by and just watch. We want to take our time and we want to learn what we need to learn to make us better assets for ourselves and our future.
And I always say, like people say boots on the ground, I always like to say our people want to be the fins in the water.
WCMRC's goal in this coast is always to be prepared and protect our coastline. We've always been above the minimum standard, but without this project, we wouldn't be where we are today. This coastline is more protected today than it ever has been in the past. And when they talk about world class, we are world class today.
Cotug Canada is opening an office right here in Beecher Bay. In addition, there will be a docking facility that will support the 2 escort tugs and the OSRV. In addition, they've invested in a unique hull coating made by a Canadian company that's revolutionizing the marine industry.
And all this new equipment that we're bringing in, all the new people we're bringing in, not only benefits the pipeline expansion in the southern tanker route, but it also benefits the entire coast. And the opportunity to move vessels up and down for any spill at any time, anywhere on this coast.
What makes this really interesting and challenging is the fact that it crosses many different types of terrain. I call it the mountains, highways, railroads, valleys, and river project, because it has all of that, and we're building on the tops of mountain passes, and we're building within cities and beside streets and sometimes within streets. That makes it very unique and challenging, but very interesting as well. If you were to talk to pipeliners, they'd say the important aspect about building a pipeline is the mainline welding crew and how fast that you do that. This project is very different than that. What's really important is the specialty crews that are building on steep slopes in narrow right-of-ways, that are building under rivers, that are building under roads, under railways, that are using the special techniques.
Technically, it was extremely challenging with the mountains and the rock and the HDDs and the microtunnels and all the technical aspects of this project.
We're following, obviously, the Coquihalla Highway, but we're following Line 1. We're following a railroad. And so all of that creates a lot of complexity in a very mountainous and rugged terrain. It also had many steep slopes. About 13% of the entire project was a steep slope that had to be overcome and use special techniques. It had a significant amount of narrow right-of-way, and we had to use what's called stovepipe techniques, where you're adding one piece of pipe at a time, and it's more tedious, but it's what's necessary when you have a very, very narrow right-of-way. Finally, we had many different major trenchless crossings. When we started this project, we expected to do 24 major trenchless crossings. We ended up doing 75. We tripled the number of major trenchless crossings we did across the project, and that was to overcome obstacles that we found as we were, building the project. We expanded 4 terminals, one in Edmonton where we added 4 tanks, 3 down here in the Lower Mainland, Burnaby Terminal where we added 14 tanks, Sumas Terminal where we added a tank and other facilities, and then finally at Westridge Terminal we expanded that significantly and added 3 berths at the Westridge Terminal. On top of that, there's 12 pumping stations that were added across the entire 1,200 kilometers of the project. Safety is one of our most important values at Trans Mountain. And on a project like this, implementing a safe culture is absolutely vital. We have to make sure that we, as leaders, commit to safety and we demonstrate that to everyone on the project. And then we have to make sure that every single person has that same commitment. And we do that by spending time with craft labor and making sure they are also committed to safety, and that we will do as leadership everything we need to do to make them as safe as they can be.
In late 2020, we had 2 very severe, significant accidents on the project. We had a fatality in October in Edmonton, and we had a life-altering injury at our Burnaby terminal in December. After those accidents, I immediately and voluntarily stood down all work on the project. We then embarked on a 2.5-month exercise in reviewing competencies, capabilities, plans, training, high-risk activity plans, safety plans, workforce deployment plans. We went through it all. As a result of the safety stand-up, we changed our monitoring practices. We changed the role of our personnel working in the field with the contractors. We changed our reporting expectations. We changed our follow-up expectations. We changed some of the training of the individuals. We made it very clear that safety was everybody's job and everybody had the right to stop work if they believed it was unsafe.
You make sure that you're always following the rules. You make sure that you're looking out for each other. You make sure that you're helping the new employees and the new workers on the job. And you're really creating a teamwork to make sure we're all working together so that nobody gets hurt and everybody goes home safely. You can definitely see it in the worker satisfaction and their engagement and their enjoyment.
Safety is part of all of our lives, everything we do, but people don't think about it that way. So my job is to get them to just change their perspective a little bit, and when you do, you can see it in their eyes. They've picked up on it, they've got it, and it's the most rewarding feeling ever. Worth more than any money that I could get for doing this is the look on that young guy's face when he realizes that what he's doing it for.
Our company had at one point more than 200 employees on the project and roughly 100 contractors working for us. They always came back with the same feedback, that Trans Mountain's adherence to the environmental protection and to the safety of our employees was first and foremost.
When we sit here today, we expended over 110 million man-hours in this project, a significant number for any project in the world. And we had a total recordable incident frequency of 0.53. What that represents is a very safe project.
In 2020 and 2021 was probably the hardest season really any of us could have faced in business on this project. Dealing with COVID-19 and all of its, all of the controls that we had to implement and still keep people working safely, it really got us all elevated. We had to implement a wide range of different controls, whether it was temperature checks once or twice a day, masks. We had masks on people that were working within 6 feet of each other, indoors and outdoors. We had increased our cleaning of any common areas, increased it. We brought on staff to facilitate that and sanitize common areas. We minimized gathering in common areas. We used face shields when we could use face shields. We put 2 people to a truck versus 4 people to a truck. Many different things.
And then we had some weather events. We had a heat dome that everyone from the interior BC would be familiar with, and wildfires associated with that.
We had many days that the air quality, the air quality index was reading up in the 90s, where, the recommendation to start coming indoors is 7. When the fires started, we had so many around us. We had them north, we had them just outside of town, we had them east of town, we had them down in the Coquihalla area and then sneaking up on Merritt. So they were really everywhere. We ended up shutting some people down due to air quality issues.
Safety was always the #1 factor that drove our decisions every single day, every minute of every day, whether that's the safety of the pipeline or the safety of our workers or even the safety of the environment. It was the single most important thing. As we moved through the response, we saw impacts to communities, impacts to individuals. We helped a lot of communities and we helped a lot of people along the way. So it was never about should we or no, we can't, we're too busy with making the pipeline safe. It was how else can we help the community? How can we divert some of our resources while also keeping everybody safe? In November of 2021, there was a historic flooding event that hit British Columbia based on 2 atmospheric rivers that came through and produced unprecedented flooding on the Coquihalla River.
The devastation was incredible. And once I got down there, I looked on one side of the road and I saw the burnt out forest, and I looked on the other side of the road to see the flood running through the trees on the wrong side of the road. So it was unbelievable.
the crews rallied to not just help themselves, but help the communities in this whole area. They volunteered their time and resources to really step up and make sure that the communities that were suffering, the individuals, the public that was suffering, that we did as much as we could to solve that. On top of that, one of the very fortunate things about this project happening at that time is that we had all of this construction gear situated along this highway. And this highway had to be reconstructed and restarted in a short period of time. And if it weren't for this project, it would have taken months longer than it did. But we worked with the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure, and we took our gear and we used it to help them to bring the highway back into operation.
Throughout the flood efforts, there were many people that were in a real tough shape. We evacuated. There were many communities evacuated, and we offered up the Merritt Camp for evacuees. Knowing that people were going to be okay that way, that gave me great satisfaction.
The call to shut down Line 1 was really about safety. By the Sunday evening, we could tell that this storm was dumping much more rain on us than what we were expecting. It was stalled out in an area that we weren't expecting, and the rivers were really responding in a way that was also unexpected. We couldn't access the pipeline corridor. Communication systems were starting to go down. We decided, out of an abundance of caution, to shut down the pipeline. The effort in this response was probably our largest response as a company to date. At one point, we had 600 people working on this problem, in excess of 100 pieces of heavy equipment. We had 7 helicopters working for us almost full time. The people that were working remotely were working anywhere between 12 and 16-hour days, just making sure that the people in the field had everything they needed when they needed it, so that we did not need to slow down when we could restart Line 1.
For many people, this is the pinnacle of their career in terms of a project that they've been associated with, not only in terms of difficulties, but the length of time that it took to complete this project, the amount of effort and the innovation that had to go into this project.
When I look back on this in 40 years and look at all the crossings under my belt that I've been part of, this project will certainly stand out as a key footnote in my repertoire.
I came in with 25 years of pipeline experience, and yet there was things I had never seen or experienced. Whether it was technical or whether it was with the First Nations and the archaeological programs or working with the various stakeholders along the route.
I think it stacks up with all of them. Whether you talk about the original railroad, the Trans-Canada Highway, all of them were nation-building infrastructure projects, and this one is right in there with them. And it actually triples the capacity of our original Line 1. It's a beautiful day, even though it's raining. This is similar to what we experienced in this area for the entire project, so it's probably very appropriate that we're sitting in the rain and talking about the end of this project.
We've had a peak workforce of about 15,000 people. We've had 110 million exposure hours during the construction of the project. We've overcome fires, floods, and pandemics. And in all of those cases, we've done it in a way that not only did we look after our own needs and make sure that our own system was safe, but we also did it in a way that we were able to provide benefits to the communities that were also affected. Every project that I've worked on throughout my career has always set expectations for the ones that come next. And Trans Mountain is no exception. One of the things I'm most proud of is Trans Mountain's reputation as a safe and reliable operator. We've been operating the system for more than 70 years, and it's the foundation from that reputation that's allowed us to build this project.
How we got here today is based on the already great program that we had, that we've continued to evolve over time. We'll respond the way we've always responded. We're going to continue to train the way we've always trained. We will continue to learn from each of those training events and from our communities and supporting the communities that we operate in. Our relationships out there are just as important to us today as they were during construction. Now that there's 2 pipelines in the ground, we need to be able to safely operate the pipeline. And in order to do that, we have to be prepared to respond to any outside influence or inside influence that has the ability to impact the safe operation of the pipeline. As part of enhanced leak detection on line 2, we installed a Hi-Fi system, which is a fiber optic cable that'll give us more detail if there's a spill. It can detect sound, it can detect temperature drops, things like that along the pipeline route.
The project's founded on extensive consultation, and through that consultation, we took the time to learn what communities needed, what they were concerned about, and we adjusted the project to make sure that those things were addressed.
One is the way that we engaged the Indigenous communities, the mutual benefit agreements we signed with them, the job creation we created. 11% of our workforce was from First Nations, over $6 billion of contracted or joint venture contracted work to Indigenous-owned companies.
This was the first major project to really put Métis people on the map in terms of being meaningfully engaged and participating in the benefits. Hundreds of Métis people in the province now have had employment opportunities with various partners on the spreads as the construction has gone along. That wouldn't have been there had we not engaged in an effective way. The revenues we're now realizing through many of these initiatives, including Trans Mountain, are really what are helping build our entire nation's capacity. We have numerous community events every year. We do cultural investments in every single one of our partner communities. We're providing new additional Michif language camps. That's exactly the kind of things that our members wanted us to do to help fill our mission and our mandate, and that's the things we're going to continue to invest in.
Our relationship with Trans Mountain will be ongoing. We have our long-term maintenance contract, which provides a number of jobs around pipeline maintenance, to sandblasting, to security, and also we'll be a part of the spill response exercises. And in the event that there is a release, we have our equipment available for Trans Mountain at all times.
The future of STEMP is looking extraordinarily bright. In all of the North Thompson, STEMP First Nations is the largest employee. People seek us out to work with us, to work for us, and it's been literally a 180 position change.
The people who have worked on this project and the contractors who have come in, they're also embedded in our community now. From my perspective, they have treated it like their home, and they have invested in it every step of the way. So we saw these more formal investments that we were able to facilitate and be able to give to not-for-profits and to charities. But then we also saw a real intention to find hidden needs in the community as well that these dollars can meet. And I think the one that really stands out is the day that there were some folks driving down the road who had been deeply involved in this fundraising and new dollars available, and they spotted a lemonade stand. And there were some kids there who were fundraising for a cause that was near and dear to their hearts. They pulled that truck over, they hopped out, and they made a sizable donation, which not only made a great impact on that cause, but also those kids who were running that lemonade stand at the end of their driveway, who realized that good people exist in this world and go above and beyond to help others. Partnerships like this don't have to happen. And so we just want to express our gratitude towards Trans Mountain for stepping into that space and saying we don't want to just show up and have a project. We want to make sure that that project has positive memories attached to it for the lifespan of it. We want to make sure that we are leaving things better than we found it, and we will be forever grateful for that in our community.
When we started the project, we had over 10,000 pages of environmental commitments and conditions, collectively known as our promises. We had safety requirements. We had a significant injury and a fatality early on in the project, and we vowed to never let that happen again. And so what we did is our teams collectively raised the bar. under intense regulatory scrutiny. We had hundreds of inspections. We had thousands of environmental and safety information requests from our regulator. And so when people talk about whether or not we could ever do a project like this again, I say yes. It's because the people that we have. These are the people who have come and they've been able to work with our contractors and they've been able to translate those requirements into real solutions. And so as Canadians, we should be proud of that. And as Trans Mountain, that is one of our biggest legacies.
Even though it's the end of the construction, it is just the beginning of Pacific Salmon Foundation's involvement. Trans Mountain has worked with the Pacific Salmon Foundation for some time as many of our interests intersect. As an independent monitor, the Pacific Salmon Foundation has commissioned a team of biologists to undertake analyses and studies at each of the salmon-bearing crossings, where the pipeline and the salmon habitat overlap, to ensure that disturbance is minimal and that the progressive development of the returning habitat is as close to natural as possible. The best possible outcome of this is an increase in salmon survival and conditions return to near normal as possible. Ideally, I would love to see salmon abundance increase greatly. At a very minimum, I'd like to see no net loss and see salmon numbers in a healthy and sustainable range.
Reclamation is the process of reestablishing the land to similar conditions to pre-disturbance. So what we're looking at here is the early stage of reclamation, and this area will be solid green within a year. It'll infill with grasses and all the small plants, followed by the shrubs, followed by the trees. We're supplemental planting with the coniferous trees as well. Gives them, I guess, a jump start to set that on the trajectory to the end land use being the coniferous forest. In 5 years, it'll look very similar to what's next to us here. It's really exciting to go back to an area that's been reclaimed and see how the animals are using it, see the different plants that are growing, all the native seed bank that just comes alive.
The value of the Trans Mountain Expansion Project cannot be overstated. This is a significant expansion of the country's pipeline network and the first with direct access to global markets without having to rely on the United States. Canada is at record high levels of oil production, and with the expansion completed, we expect record high export levels as well. For the oil and gas industry, it means more customers. More exports at higher prices means more money coming back into the Canadian economy, which contributes to the GDP, and that enhances every Canadian's buying power and the quality of life for all Canadians.
So I've been working on this project for a long time, and I'm very proud to see it get to this stage where we're beginning to make deliveries out of the system to serve new markets. I'm incredibly proud of the compelling benefits that we'll create for the economy. I'm incredibly proud of the resilience that the team that has constructed the project that got it this far has demonstrated in terms of overcoming challenges like fires and floods and the pandemic. We've overcome significant political challenges and created feats of engineering in terms of building a pipeline through the mountains. And I look forward to taking that into the future with the expanded system as we begin deliveries into world markets.